From the innovators of Delay of Game and 2 for 2 comes a new sports talk forum, but with the same mentality, to bring you the top sports headlines in a simple way.
With Ryan Swanigan.
I only glazed over it, yeah.
Now you're just more than sniffing my socks. LOL.
And Brent Bonfleur.
Oh, okay, so, that is totes my fave dress. Tetuan! Camila Villegas. I'm feral.
You're listening to The Route, a sports talk podcast.
Welcome into another great show and lots of things today. I mean, a lot of things. There's so much going on. We will have, hopefully it will happen. We will have in this show, by the end of this show, the college football playoff semifinals will be announced. So we're going to have that. We're also, by the way, quick side note, now officially less than a month away from 1, the end of the route, but 2, the return of Delay of Game. Yeah, Brent Bonfleur is so excited. So is our third person that will be joining us for that. And we're not exactly going to release who it is yet, but we will have a third person. It's not John Kipper, I know. I'm sorry.
Let's just say they're kind of a big deal.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I know. I'd like to have Kipper too, but, it's just unfortunately it doesn't really work out that well.
I'm going to let it out of the bag. It's Oprah.
Close.
Oh, that's what you said.
But not exactly.
You better double check that, my friend.
But anyways, we will have the college football playoff release, I guess, in this show. We will also have some coaching hirings to talk about, including the latest one that just happened this morning here on this Sunday, December 6th. A former Florida head coach taking a job in the SEC.
Oh, yeah.
Moving a bit north.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be rough for him next season.
Yes, it will. So, anyways, we'll have all that. But first, very interesting to note that there has been a lot of, chaos in the world right now. And this is another one of those scenarios where you just got to keep pushing through it and pushing forward because, I really don't know how to sum it up anymore. It's to the point in the entire world, our society, where you just, we haven't become numb to mass shootings and all these things and these terrible issues that happen in our world, but it's to the point where it's getting out of control. It already has been getting out of control, but now it's to the point where now we really got to stop talking and do something about it. But let's also remember, and cue the rant music here in just a moment, but you can't necessarily force people to do things. People do what they want. That's why America is the way it is. We have the freedom to choose whatever we want to do. And that has an interesting, very, very interesting tie into sports. Brent Bonfleur will join me for this rant, which starts right now.
Yes, it's time for the original Ryan's rant, but Ryan goes off on something that's more fake than fake or completely improbable. This used to air on his old show, but now he's gone from that show, so he's here on the route. And so, Ryan's rant can continue to harvest life's absurd issues that have simple solutions if logic is applied. In short, we just call this segment Ryan's Rant.
So, this was an interesting subject and a discussion that I saw earlier in the week on ESPN's Outside the Lines. And the discussion of coaching hirings and firings and the standards that coaches are held to in college football and winning. And that was the main subject that was talked about on that edition that day. I don't remember which day I saw this. It was earlier in the week. But it was kind of a sub-point that was brought up. And this is about the third or fourth different sport that I have heard that includes this discussion. And it is the issue of race in sports. And I'm not talking about players saying nasty things or the fans being racist. I'm talking about the ethnicity that is in sports. And first of all, my view of ethnicity in sports is this. I don't really care, what your skin color is, where you're from, what country you represent, any of that. If you can play the sport, you can play the sport. If you can't, you can't. That it's that simple. We are kind of in a society that nowadays doesn't exactly want to accept things, I guess. And so we whine and complain and force our way that we want. We force what we want onto the table to make it happen. Now, to tie all that together for today's rant subject, the issue of race in sports, you can't force players or people of different races or different colored skin or whatever it is. You can't force people to just start playing sports or coaching sports or getting involved. They have to want to do it. Now, you can advocate for them playing, for example, baseball. I know there's an ongoing issue with the lack of African American players or black players, however you want to say that. There is that issue going on in Major League Baseball and how some people see it as there are not enough African American or black players in Major League Baseball, or they're saying that more African American or black players need to play baseball. They need to get involved, and it starts at the young age. And to me, there is a fine line, a very fine line that I don't know if people understand or not, that divides advocating and forcing minorities to play and coach sports. Now, the subject in the Outside the Lines discussion that happened earlier in the week that I brought up was there are not enough minority coaches in college football. And you could say the same thing maybe for the NFL, but there's only 32 teams in the NFL. So there's only a certain amount of openings that would be there. Now, again, it goes to a certain point when you're talking about wanting to have minority coaches and minority players to even out the playing field. That I understand, to make it equal, and I am all for equality. This country should be about equality, and yet it still not is. That's a whole other matter. But you can't cross the line and start forcing minorities like Hispanics or African Americans or blacks or people of Japanese or Chinese or Korean culture to start participating in these sports or coaching these sports. You can't force them. And that's what I don't think people understand is you can't just say, hey, you've got to get involved in this. You can advocate for it. Advocating isn't exactly pressuring. It is telling somebody, hey, you could do very well in this sport. Here is why. List out the reasons. Throw in the disclaimer, I'm not saying you have to do this. I'm saying you could do well. The choice is always up to the single person who is involved. You can't force Hispanics to play football. You can't force African Americans or blacks to play baseball. There are sports where those different ethnicities, people of those ethnicities are interested in certain sports because whether it be those ethnicities are athletically gifted in those areas, like, for example, African Americans and blacks have always been prominently just amazing at basketball. That has been the sport that they dominate. Soccer has been dominated by Hispanics or Europeans of the German race, the French race, etc. Whites have dominated baseball because that is the sport that they have grown up with. Same thing for football. Football is kind of the perfect mix between whites and African Americans or blacks. You also have some Hispanic players in there as well. Football and soccer are the two sports where they are almost, I'd say, what, Brent, like a little basically balanced between races.
Which sports now?
Football and soccer.
Sort of. I think in soccer, yeah, it's bigger, much bigger in Europe and South America, really anywhere but the United States.
Right. Not yet, at least.
Right. And football.
Yeah.
I'd
say it's
football
pretty
is a
balanced.
Majority African American.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
Really?
I think probably.
Wow.
I
would say
probably,
it's pretty even between whites and African Americans or blacks.
I'd say it's at least 60-40 African American. I'd say closer to 70-30.
Right.
But that's more balanced than some other sports.
Right. And that's the thing is that it all goes back to interest. Whatever the single person is interested in, you can't really take that away from them. Again, like for example, in Major League Baseball, a lot of players are coming from the Caribbean countries like the Dominican Republic, like Cuba, like Puerto Rico. And it's because that is what they are interested in because other Major League Baseball players who are from that area, they're advocating it. They are teaching them. Now that is fine because that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to go into the neighborhoods and teach the kids how to play the sports that they are interested in. Kids choose what they want to play. You can't force that. That's the thing that I'm going to keep going back to here. You cannot force kids to play a sport that you think they need to play just because race, there's a imbalance in the racial aspect of the sport, like baseball, like basketball. You can't force change for that. You can advocate children and young athletes of certain races to try and gain their interest in playing the sport. You can't force them to play it just so that way there is a balance. And that's what I think is becoming a huge issue that people are just kind of, ignoring, not because, maybe it is because of political correctness. I'm not exactly certain.
I didn't see the Outside the Lines episode you're talking about. So what exactly was it? They think that there's an issue with...
They eventually got to the point where they think there's an issue of coaches in college football, and there was some obscure stat that said there are only, I think, roughly 9 head coaches who are of a minority race coaching in college football. Everybody else is white, essentially.
Okay, so that to me, that sounds not like people are forcing their kids to play certain sports. That's more of an issue of blacks and other ethnic groups are not being hired at the same rate as whites.
Well, see, if that's the case, then that needs
has been
to
the
change.
Case for a long time.
Yeah, that needs to change.
Right.
I fully agree with that. But they brought up the point, I think it was Kirk Herbstreit brought up the point of, you have to start by gaining interest from, or getting young minorities interested in the graduate coach, the graduate assistant spots, because that's where it starts. You start out at the graduate assistant, then you move up to a low-level coordinator position, then you move up to another coordinator position, and then if you're good enough at that point, then you become a head coach.
Right.
It's not a simple thing of snapping your fingers and all of a sudden there's this interest, there's these great coaches. There is so much that goes into coaching and teaching and being a good coach, not just at the college level, but in the at the pro level. I said NFL; it's the first thing that popped into my head. But at the pro level, at the college level, at the high school level, at the youth level, at the kindergarten level, there are so many factors. And again, it's not as simple as just saying, "Well, we need to make sure that that there is a change that happens." It's not going to happen overnight. You can't just, like I said, snap your fingers and there's a change.
Right.
And things are fixed. Yes, you have to get minorities interested in coaching, but at the end of the day, you can't force them to become graduate assistants.
Right.
Because that means, one, you have to go back to the classroom. You have to take classes because you're not just there to be an assistant for the coaches on the sidelines. You're there taking classes. You're there getting a degree. You're helping the football players as well. It's just not one simple thing. So you can't force them to do that because there is not a lot of interest in doing that unless you can advocate it in a way and tell the minorities that there are benefits to this. You have to work hard for it, and a lot of them do. Don't get me wrong in any way. So many minorities work their butts off to become great people in society as far as coaching goes, or not even just in sports in general. Politicians, business personnel, whatever the case may be, there are people that do work their butts off, but they have to also be interested and understand what they have to go through in order to get to that point.
Right. I think the underlying problem or assumption here is kind of what you just talked about is, and I'm not bashing you here, I'm just saying the way you said that was there are plenty of minorities who work their butts off and are capable of attaining these positions, right? First of all, the assumption that there's kind of an underlying assumption. Again, I'm not bashing you,
right?
But there's kind of an underlying assumption that those people are not qualified for those positions already, and that it's rare for someone to be qualified from a minority ethnic group. to have one of those positions, which, I think that's your biggest problem there. And then you institute things like affirmative action, which there's debate back and forth on that big time. Is that even a good thing? Is that a help? I think it's a very well-intentioned process. I think ultimately it is positive because there are instances where, well, first of all, there are instances where it's more of an obligation, and organizations that have no intention of hiring a person who's, let's say, Black or Asian or Latino, they just have to interview one of those candidates just to check the box, right? And they never have any intention of hiring them anyway. That's not what it's intended for. That's what happens a lot of times.
And that shouldn't, and that's what I'm saying, that is also another major point in this rant. That should not be the case.
Right.
We should not be that. I don't know if it's a stereotype or if it's just the way that we think.
It's just racial bias.
And that needs to be, it needs to be axed.
Right.
It needs to stop.
Right.
And whatever. It needs to go away, and it needs to go away quickly. But again, just like I said with hiring minority coaches or having minority players, it doesn't happen overnight. We want it to,
right,
and we need it to,
right,
but it takes training, teaching, consistent repetition of the process of understanding this is wrong. Don't do it. Everybody is the same. I am the same person as, list a minority, ethnicity, race, whatever here. I am the same person as that person. I'm the same person as that person, and this person and that person over there. We're all the same. Each of us have different abilities and talents. And once we realize them, with or without help from others, we go after that because that's what we want. And this scenario is we're trying to force, instead of advocating, that you have to be involved in this sport because it is ethnically imbalanced.
Right.
And that's, to me, it's like,
yeah, I get what you're saying.
That's an issue, but too bad. It's about what they're interested in.
Well, I think the point is that Outside the Lines is trying to get at, and I think the underlying point is here, that there is a group of these people who are interested in these coaching jobs, and they're not getting a fair shake at it.
And that's why I'm saying that needs to change.
Right. I think that's more what they're getting at. I mean, yeah, you can't force anyone to, well, I mean, you can debate if you can force people to do things or not, but yeah, you're not going to force someone to enter any job field that they don't want to do. I mean, I guess there are parents who force their kids to get degrees in certain things, or, tell them they have to play sports through school or whatever, but eventually everyone has control of their own life.
Right. And that's what I'm saying is what you just said.
Well, yeah, so certainly there are not going to be as many Black, Hispanic, Latino, Asian candidates because there are not that, if they are a minority group in general of the population, there's most likely not going to be as many candidates, just like, so say America is made up of 50% white and 50% not white. The candidate pool should be somewhere around 50% white and 50% not white. And I think that, I don't know that that's so, that's probably never going to change. I mean, there are always exceptions. There are years where there will be, an increase in hires of, let's say, African-American coaches compared to other years. But for the most part, if the United States is 50% white, 50% of the hires, at least, are going to be white. And if it's 20% Black, 20% of the hires will be Black. So, I don't know how that's really going to change. I think the point here is making sure that those who are, we'll use the word disenfranchised, have the same opportunities to get the jobs as white people have.
Exactly. And we should, and if it's a matter of us not being welcoming to them, to the opportunities that they could have, and we're not welcoming them to that,
yeah. Well,
then that also needs to change.
That's certainly an issue. I don't think many people would disagree that racism, just like in society, is a problem in sports. I mean, we've seen it with Donald Sterling and, whoever you could say, Jerry Jones. I'm not going to say that, but there are people who say that certain people are racist, and it's most likely true that it is true that there are certain people, owners, general managers, whoever, administrators, front office people in sports that have refused to hire non-white coaches because they're of a racial bias. That's just, I'm sure that's a fact. I can't prove it. Now, I don't have an example, but I am sure that is a fact.
With that, you also can't start confusing that scenario with being qualified for the job, knowing the sport inside out,
right?
That you are involved in.
Yeah, but there's also an underlying bias that even if you looked at the resume of a white coaching candidate and a black coaching candidate and they were exactly the same, there's an implicit bias to hire the white coach just because white people in general in America are seen as being better or more qualified or smarter or whatever you want to say. There is an underlying perception or whatever you want to call it that is the case. Now, do I agree with that? Of course not.
Yeah, I don't
but
either.
It exists, and you'd be kidding yourself if you said it didn't. So there are times, like you said, they need to be qualified, but sometimes even when a coach, a candidate is qualified and they're not white, they don't get a fair shake at the job, and that is the fault of whoever it is responsible for hiring.
Right.
And so those people need to go. Now, how do you do that? I don't know. It's a long, hard process. Like you said, it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah,
and you're also kidding yourself if you think it will. It won't.
The whole thing is really a very complicated scenario.
Well, it's not even a sports problem. It's a societal problem that, just like anything else, reaches into sports because sports is an extension of society. The same people who play sports make up society. The same people who are fans of sports. I was talking about this with some people the other night. Like when there are big sporting events like the Super Bowl, how all sorts of things increase. Prostitution skyrockets in whatever city the Super Bowl is in. Drinking, crime rates, they skyrocket. And, that's because it's just a microcosm of society as a whole. It's not that it's not that sports has nothing to do with it. The same thing happens with concerts. When you have 100,000 people packed into a venue for a concert, the same problems are going to persist. Maybe they're a little different. Maybe, for example, drug rates increase more than prostitution at a concert. But, there's still all these problems. It's not because of sports. It's because of the people that work in those fields. And that's just a reflection on society as a whole.
Brent Bonfleur bringing in the political side of things that I would never be able to thoroughly discuss, I guess.
Yeah, well, me either, but...
Well, you did it a lot better than I did, that's for sure. The point is, there are so many different things with this, and again, I go back to this we should be advocating, yes. We should be advocating as much as possible for minorities to be involved in other sports, but don't force them to play, participate, to seek after the sports that we see as racially imbalanced. Sometimes that's just the way it goes because that's the interest level from those different ethnicities in the sport. Whites for baseball, African Americans or blacks for basketball. That's how it just is. You can't. Sometimes you can't change that. Sometimes we want to change things so that way there's true equality going on. Sometimes you can't do that. But should we stop advocating that? Should we stop trying to, stop advocating? No. Should we stop turning down the minorities who are looking to get involved in these sports? Should we stop it? Yes. We have to be accepting of those who want to get involved. For example, African Americans or blacks in baseball. Be accepting of them. Now, yes, I understand there's a whole talent aspect of it and whether or not they can play the sport. If they can, help them along. If they can't, they're probably good at a different sport that they don't know that they need to realize. And again, all of this just gets very sticky with political correctness and all this other stuff. But we have to make sure that we're not forcing, we're advocating, but we're also accepting and welcoming to minorities who want to get involved in other sports. We cannot be doing things that we think are right that are actually wrong. And it's very important that we as a society figure out what is right and what is wrong. And I certainly hope that I just spelled that out in what is right and what is wrong when it comes to minorities participating here in sports.
You're listening to The Route, a sports talk podcast. Available online at theroute.wordpress.com and on YouTube. It's time now for Out of Play, the part of The Route where Ryan Swanigan and Brent Barnfloor discuss one major controversial sports story from the week.
All right, it's not really controversial. It might be in some ways. I don't know. But the official college football playoff has been released, and it reads as the following. It will be number 1, Clemson, taking on number 4, Oklahoma, in the Capital One Orange Bowl on Thursday, December 31st. Following that, I don't know which game is first. They don't post which game is first. I think it would be Clemson, Oklahoma. Following that game is number 2, Alabama, against number 3, Michigan State. Now, I think, Brent, there was no real debate or question that this was the top 4 in college football. The question would be, what is the order for these teams?
Well, I think in my opinion, they got the order wrong, but
really?
I am glad that they did, because I think this is going to be the best way for it. I think that Oklahoma is better than Michigan State. And I think if there's any team, I do think the top 4, you find you can maybe argue a couple other teams. I still think, if you played the Michigan State-Ohio State game right now, I think, Ohio State could win, and, I think they might be deserving to still be in there. But I'm fine with the 4. I like that the teams that are the most similar are going to match up. And what I mean by that is Clemson and Oklahoma, high-flying offenses,
yes,
good defenses, don't get me wrong, but that's the offensive side of things, right? Alabama, Michigan State, they're the defenses. So the reason this works out the best, in my opinion, is because you put the 2 offensive teams together, you find out who the best one is. You put the 2 defensive ones together, you find out who the best one is, and then you take the winner of the offense, the winner of the defense, and you put them together, and you see which one prevails. I think that makes for the most entertaining. I think that makes for the best games. So in that sense, I'm happy it is, but in my opinion, Oklahoma is a better team than Michigan State.
Yeah. Why? Because you're basing that off of the loss to Nebraska?
No, I just don't think that...
Because Oklahoma lost to Texas, But Texas has been taking down
Texas
some top
has been the
teams,
giant slayer. Yeah, it's weird.
This season. It started with Oklahoma. They just took down Baylor this weekend.
No, Oklahoma compares. People say, well, Michigan State has played a really tough schedule. Well, yeah, they have. But Oklahoma has beat more teams in the top, 40 RPI. Michigan State has beat 6. Oklahoma's beat 10. So it's not like Oklahoma has had an easy schedule, not at all. And yeah, they lost to Texas. But, like we said, Texas is a super roller coaster this year. Just really, really weird. I don't think that they're a great team at all. I think they're like a C- team. Mm-hmm. But, and Oklahoma has one better than, I'm the biggest advocate of a win is a win is a win. It doesn't matter. That's the only thing that matters at the end of the day.
Coming from the Florida Gators fan.
Right. But if you are going to, try to compare which one is better and they have the same record, Oklahoma has been winning by like 25 points a game, whereas Michigan State's been like eking out, their average win is 10 points. Their average margin of victory is 10 points a game. And that includes all the cupcakes that they've played, too. So they haven't been as dominant as Oklahoma has. That's why I say that they're better. I think if there's any weak link in this Final Four, it's most definitely Michigan State.
Yeah. This is an interesting subject with the difference between Michigan State and Oklahoma. And funny and interestingly enough, the difference between Nebraska and Texas, because those are the teams that picked up wins against the 3 and the 4 in the college football playoff. Nebraska beat Michigan State. Texas beat Oklahoma. Texas, their season, as we said, has been very, very strange. They lost terribly to Notre Dame. They lost barely to Oklahoma State. They lost terribly to TCU. Then they beat Oklahoma. And then they only lost by 3 to Texas Tech. What a weird season Texas Tech has had. And then they beat Baylor.
Yeah. That's just weird.
A depleted quarterback team, or depleted Baylor quarterback.
True, but
team.
Still, a good team.
But they get shut out to Iowa State 24-0.
Yeah, what?
Yeah, so for Oklahoma to lose to Texas, it makes it even more weird now that Texas beat Baylor and they can throw that in with beating Oklahoma while losing to other quality ranked teams and then getting shut out to Iowa State.
I think if you had to rank which team had the worst loss, which again, a loss is a loss, but still, if you were going to try to rank which one is worse, I think the loss to Nebraska is much worse than
the
Texas.
Loss. I disagree.
Really?
I think now you look at Nebraska's losses. Yeah, Miami, by the way, is a bowl eligible team. Despite everything they've gone through this year, they are bowl eligible. Yeah. So Nebraska lost to a bowl eligible team. Take it what you will when it comes to that in overtime. They lost to a BYU team that is also bowl eligible. They lost barely to Wisconsin, barely to Illinois, barely to Purdue, barely to Northwestern, barely to Iowa. I mean, it's a touchdown and a 2-point conversion to Iowa.
Right.
So but Nebraska was in their games, all of their games.
That's fair.
Texas, 38-3 to Notre Dame, 50-7 TCU, 24-0 to Iowa State.
Yeah, now that's bad. But look at the teams that they lost to, and even though they lost by more, I mean, those teams are like way, way better. If you put TCU against Miami, TCU is going to blow them out of the building.
But Nebraska, with their losses, defeating Michigan State, Nebraska's losses have been to quality opponents. Now, in the Big 12, it's now a question of, well, how good really was TCU? They didn't have as many injuries at the time that they just destroyed Texas. They did later in the season. Yeah. Same thing with Baylor and Texas's win.
Still a very good team.
The Big 12 was very weird in how good their teams really were this season, because the good teams at the top either A, like Oklahoma State, didn't have a high-quality quarterback like Oklahoma does, or B, if you're Baylor and TCU, you went through so many injuries that you got depleted in certain areas. So it's just it.
Well, that's why it's
why
impossible to ever figure this completely out.
That's why I make the case, though, that Michigan State, I think, is deserving of the number 3 because, one, they beat a good Iowa team. Now, quick side note here. Yes, Iowa lost. Yes, we questioned them the whole season.
Oh, they're a good team.
But last night, Iowa did prove that they are worthy of what their record was.
Oh, yeah.
All Iowa did was play Northwestern up to that point and beat them 40-10. They hadn't played anybody, okay? That's the point that everybody, this doesn't. You have it. This is no longer the BCS. This is what all of college football country struggles to understand nowadays. Even the top tier analysts at ESPN, they're still struggling to understand this. This is not the BCS. Record does not mean much of anything anymore. Who have you played? Iowa has played one good team, Northwestern. Maybe Wisconsin, if you want to be nice. Throw in Wisconsin. That is it. Last night, Iowa played a top 10 team for the first time all season.
Top 4 team.
Top 5 team, yeah, top 4. And they lost by 3. My point with Iowa is they proved, finally, in the biggest game of them all, they can hang with top 10, top 5 teams.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was what I was looking to see is if it was either a blowout, if it was a close loss, or if Iowa won. And it was the second one, which was the close loss. That, to me, is enough to say that Iowa is very deserving of their record of 12-0, leading into that game and now 12-1. But still, they truly did earn the right to be there because they stayed with Michigan State the whole game. They had a lead for quite a while.
Right.
It was 13 to 9? 13 to 9. So it was basically back and forth in field goals.
Right.
And then finally the touchdown to give them the lead for almost the entire fourth quarter. And then finally in the last second, L.J. Scott just turns into Derrick Henry or some monster running back and just gets the touchdown, and that was it. But for Iowa to have it come down to the last less than a minute, ironically, if you're a Husker fan listening to this, that to me proved that Iowa is worthy of where they were.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, it was the close loss. Could have won or they could have got blown out. If you play that game 5 more times, you'd have probably 2 wins for Iowa. It would be different. 2 more close losses and a blowout in there. It's just there's no way you can predict that. Yeah, they most certainly deserve it.
But that's why I say I think Michigan State is number 3, and deservingly so because they have powered through their season. The Big Ten, let's be honest, the Big Ten is stronger and more physical than the Big 12. And I think that shows in how many low-level teams there are in the Big 12 compared to Big 10. But then it was like, well, what if they're the same? Then look at how those low-level teams played against the big-level teams. Look at the Indiana Hoosiers. How many losses they had this season, and how many of them were so close. How many Big 12 teams, like Texas, for example, with their losses were close? They lost by 1 on a missed... No, it wasn't a miss. It was a botched extra point attempt to Cal, non-conference game. Then you score 7 against TCU. You get shut out to Iowa State. And then you turn around and beat Kansas 59-20, but anybody could beat Kansas.
Literally everybody beat Kansas.
Yeah. And
did they win a game all year?
No.
No.
But my point is,
season.
the Big 12, not as strong as the Big 10. Probably, I would say, the Big 10 and the SEC were at the same level this year.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother debate topic. But That's why I say I think they got it right. Michigan State 3, Oklahoma 4. Plus, Oklahoma didn't play a conference championship game.
Right. No, yeah.
But you can't deny them into the college football playoff. Though.
No. And I think they got it right in the sense that the top 2 teams and then the bottom 2 teams of the 4 are right, because my guess is Clemson and Alabama are going to be the ones in the national championship. Now, I would have said Alabama a few weeks ago, but Clemson is really impressive. When I watch them, they are very, very good.
Clemson?
So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, they could just, I think it's a coin toss, but actually, if I had to put money on it, I'd probably put it on Clemson right now. So anyway.
We're going to see what the rest of the bowl games look like as time progresses. Hopefully, they will be just as interesting as we expect them to be. We'll be keeping a very close eye on that, as well as if Nebraska makes a bowl game, number 1, and which bowl game they will be in, and number 3, who they will play, since we are all here based in Lincoln, Nebraska. Husker Countdown planning a trip there, Brent? Go to the low-level bowl game, the lowest of the low?
Hey, if they'll give out the goodie bags to us, sure.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, get like an iPad and an Xbox and a TV and a car.
It's a low-level bowl game, Brent. They're going to be lucky to pass
so you
out
get like a Home Depot gift card.
Like
and
a $20 watch. They're going to be lucky enough to pass out like 300 of those, you know?
What are those, MP3 player?
Yeah.
You get like an MP3 player and watch.
Or an iPod Nano, I believe.
Yeah, some old school.
Yeah, like what I have.
Old iPods, the little skinny things with like the 4 buttons on the little circle.
Oh, I don't have mine with me, but yeah, it's in the car.
So you get a flip phone.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
That's very good.
You're listening to The Route, a sports talk podcast. On Facebook.com/TheRoute2 and on Twitter @the_Route2.
All right, so we move on now to the coaching hirings, and Will Muschamp this morning, sources reporting from ESPN that Will Muschamp might be accepting the job at North Carolina. Believe it or not. Brent Bonfleur.
That's totally wrong.
I'm sorry, South Carolina. Wrong Carolina.
Like,
the SEC Carolina.
Like what? Where did that report come
That's
from?
my bad. My goodness.
He's already accepted the job at South Carolina. Yeah, I think that's a done deal.
Oh, really?
So far as I know, it's the last thing I read. It was a done deal. Now maybe they were just speculating still, but no, I think, sure. I guess I wasn't impressed with him at Florida. He did okay, but it was just, they didn't have the great personnel during his tenure. That's one of those examples of where the season they had this year is because of the players he recruited while he was there, and now all that talent is coming to fruition. Their defense, Florida's defense, is unreal. Say what you want about the offense. Not even the whole offense, actually, just the quarterback, really.
Right.
Just the quarterback stinks. Treyon Harris, sorry, man, love you, but you are just not very good at all.
Not cut out for the job.
But their defense is like next level. It's incredible that, they stop the run better probably than like any team in the country. And then their secondary is all like first-round NFL draft picks. They are absolutely loaded. So he has the potential to be a good coach. There's a reason he was been on staffs like with Mac Brown at Texas. There's a reason he kept him around. This guy's no schlub, but he just didn't really have a great time at Florida in his first gig. So, best of luck to him at South Carolina. I just think it might be a little bit of the same situation, although I think South Carolina is a little bit further ahead. I don't know. We'll see.
Not certain.
But, I think he'll have his lumps, but I think if he's one of those coaches like Mike Riley, I think if you give them time, he can be a good coach.
Yeah.
So
we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Some of the other coaching hirings that took place earlier in the week, the big one with Mark Richt being introduced at Miami. That was a big deal. Something that I don't think really got a lot of attention was Bronco Mendenhall leaving BYU to go to Virginia.
Right.
That was kind of. That was really out of the blue.
Which
Something
is weird.
that,
Why would you go to Virginia over BYU?
yeah, I know.
I mean,
It's just very weird.
BYU has been good for a long time. People don't really think of them as being one of the top programs, but I mean, like, there are very few, they're in like the top 5 teams over like the last decade as far as wins. Mm-hmm. They've been very, very good.
Yeah.
So Virginia's like a complete dumpster fire.
Yeah, it's just very, very strange. Very strange. As far as other ones go, again, we mentioned Virginia, USC sticking with Clay Helton, who went 5-2 after Steve Sarkisian was fired because of his alcoholic incidents, I guess, to put it that way. Other interesting hires: Syracuse gets Dino, I want to say Bobbers. Dino Bobbers out of Bowling Green, who went 10-3. He had a very good record. I think 18-9 in 2 seasons at Bowling Green.
It's pretty good at Bowling Green.
Yeah, Bowling Green always picks up these coaches that are really, really good. Urban Meyer, one of them. Dino Barbers, another. There's another one before Dino, not Barbers, but
Just go on to
Bobbers.
do bigger and better things.
Exactly.
Sorry, Bowling Green.
Yeah,
You're
Bowling
like the rebound.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Iowa State picked up Matt Campbell, who was the head coach at Toledo, who went 9-2.
Probably a good hire.
We'll see how Iowa State does with that going forward.
Can't get much worse.
Yeah, I guess. DJ Durkin is the hire at the Maryland Terrapins football program.
Okay.
A coordinator from, I cannot remember where. He is not listed as having a previous coaching job as a head coach. So
I don't think so. I think he's been an assistant.
Look it up. DJ Durkin. Oh, he was an assistant or defensive coordinator. Defensive coordinator at the University of Michigan. Mm-hmm. Looks like he worked for the Florida Gators beforehand. So that's where
he's been a good assistant.
Yeah, that's what DJ Durkin has done before. Was Jim Harbaugh's defensive coordinator and linebackers coach this past season, and now he will take over at Maryland. He was the interim coach at Florida. Got them their bowl game victory last year, I believe.
Who was?
DJ Durkin. Did Florida go to a bowl game last year? Yeah, they did. Yeah. And they won it. And DJ Durkin, interim head coach, got him that win. So there you go, Brent. Other hires... Not really much else of interesting note, to be fully honest. I guess Barry Odom at Missouri. That one was also out of left field.
I don't know who that is, but I guess I wasn't surprised that they were going to have a new coach.
But yeah, I mean, I thought certainly they might go with a better hire, maybe. I don't know. But he was the defensive coordinator at... I don't know where. I'm going to double check here this one again. Defensive coordinator at Missouri. So they basically just bumped him up from where he was and made him the head coach. So there's that. A lot of in program hires for some of them. But anyways, enough about that. Let's go to the Scott Frost hire at UCF.
All right, what is Ryan's theory?
Okay, here's my theory. So Sean Eichhorst at Nebraska wanted Mike Riley. He didn't know who he was going to hire after he fired Bo Pelini. He was uncertain. And then he discovered Mike Riley. They hired him. Harvey Perlman liked him. Harvey Perlman should not be involved. But I digress on that one. Mm-hmm. He's out the door in, 4 or 5 months here at Nebraska.
Not too much longer.
Yeah, I know. Won't that be a joy?
Wow.
I'm sorry. Truth be told.
Oh, man.
I'm sorry. Anyways.
Oh, my.
So Scott Frost continues on as coordinator at Oregon. Continues that job. And then finally, gets offered a job at UCF, kind of a mid-level college team football program.
Yeah, weird because they were great 2 years ago and just they lost all their games. This year. Yeah, so just a huge drop off.
So UCF is doing the complete turnaround. They want to just they want to start over and clean house. So they bring in Scott Frost from the high-powered, firing on all cylinders Oregon Ducks program. Meanwhile, at Nebraska, 5-7 in Mike Riley's first year. But I'm going off of Brent Bonfleur's theory. That's tricky to say. Try saying that 5 times.
Brent Bonfleur's theory.
Yeah, 5 times fast.
Brent Bonfleur's theory. Brent Bonfleur's theory. Yeah, right. It is kind of hard. Yeah.
Brent Bonfleur's theory.
I struggle to say my own name. That and hamburger.
Hamburger?
Yeah.
That's weird. Anyways, so 3 years from now, let's go season 3. So 2017. Very challenging year, by the way, for Nebraska. They take on, I think, 3 of the 4 right now, as it is, top college football programs in the Big Ten. Wisconsin, Ohio State, Michigan, and I think Michigan State. I'm not sure. They might not be Michigan State. But anyways, 3 of those 4 they play. That's the defining season for Mike Riley in Nebraska, if the hire was good. If it's not so good, you give him another season in season 4. Mm-hmm. And if that's bad, Mike Riley is gone. By that time, who is into their 4th year potentially at the University of Central Florida?
Scott Frost.
Who, if he is potentially doing well at the University of Central Florida, would Nebraska look to possibly go get if, number 1, Sean Eichhorst is still around? If he's not, number 2, new athletic director comes in. Who is he looking to possibly go get?
Is it Scott Frost?
Exactly.
Okay.
Remember what I told you about the Tom Osborne tree?
Yeah.
And how Nebraska broke away. They cut it. They cut off the branches from the Tom Osborne tree twice.
Yeah.
First Frank Solich, then Bo Pelini.
Yeah.
Scott Frost is tied to that tree. Scott Frost could come back to where he had so much success at Memorial Stadium in Lincoln. Mm-hmm. Turn Nebraska around and make it great again. The question would be...
Sounds like Donald Trump.
The question would be, would the fans have the patience for Scott Frost? Because they didn't for Frank Solich. They didn't for Bo Pelini after 7 seasons.
All right.
Would Scott Frost end up being the same way? Or would Scott Frost be 3rd time's a charm? That is... Of course, if
people are so in love with Scott Frost here.
I'm not in love with Scott Frost. I'm saying it makes sense because Scott Frost is from Tom Osborne's
right. No, I get it.
Realm of greatness,
right? Yeah.
So 1, Scott Frost has to work out for Central Florida. That's the big thing. 2, Mike Riley has to not work out for Nebraska in order for potentially Scott Frost to end up in Lincoln, if the athletic department goes that way, which it'd kind of be disappointing if they didn't. But again, number 1, we don't know Sean Eichhorst because Sean Eichhorst kind of has a little bit of a Roger Goodell feel to him,
Yeah, actually, that's kind of
just
true.
A certain couple of ways.
That's interesting. Yeah,
I know.
Yeah.
That might be a discussion for another time.
Yeah, they're both weird. If that's what you're saying.
Yeah. But anyways,
I don't think many people like them either.
Yeah,
don't
exactly.
Like
yeah, see what I mean? They don't really. They're both businessmen. They don't really engage that well with the fans.
Yeah,
if at all. Interesting subject. That might be a subject point for later.
Take away from this segment, though, Scott Frost is Nebraska's coach in the next 4 years.
4 or 5, potentially, if everything plays out. Don't forget, this is just like the rant. You have to have certain things play out in different ways.
Right.
Nebraska has to do badly. Scott Frost has to do well. Maybe a new athletic director for Nebraska.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of things that go into that. But that is my theory. This is Scott Frost's first coaching job. It's at a mid-level college football program. It's not a low-level one. It's not a big-time school like South Carolina or whatever. It's right in the middle. It's a good starting point for Scott Frost with a background of the offensive coordinator at Oregon.
Right.
This is a good hire for Central Florida. I really like this one, and maybe it will work out for Nebraska 5 years from now. We don't know. We don't know how Mike Riley's going to do here in Lincoln. We're basing it off of one season right now at this point.
Right,
in a season that I said
silly.
we should have dropped the expectations for.
Exactly.
So that's where I stand on that.
Fair enough.
No predictions for the show. We're actually closing in on the end of the show, but I can't let this one go here.
It's time now for
It's your world, and we're just living in it.
a story about a selfish athlete, coach, or just a person in general from the week.
Now, if you didn't think that we were not going to talk about Jahlil Okafor, well,
You better double check that, my friend.
now
double check that.
There were so many signs that there was going to be trouble with Jahlil Okafor in the NBA.
There were?
Yes. It started at the very first day that he entered the 76ers facility. And you saw him, hold that jersey and just whoosh, dropped it. I'm out of here. See ya. I'm not happy to be here.
Yeah.
Right there from the beginning, that was the sign. There could be some problems with this kid.
Yeah.
Maybe, maybe not. But that's not really a good start when you're dropping your jersey at the photo op press conference and you walk out. That's not a good start. And now things have finally unraveled for him. 2-game suspension, 2 videos out now of him getting into a fight with people in Boston, driving 109 on a freeway in the Northeast.
108. Don't be unfair.
Oh, I thought it was 109. Was it 108?
I've heard 108, but
Over 100 miles an hour.
in a 35 or 45. It was one of the
I don't
two.
know where it was. It was on an interstate somewhere in the Northeast.
Oh no, it was not. Well, I don't think it was. It wasn't. When you say interstate, people think like 75. No, like he was going in excess of it was like a 35 or 45 mile per hour zone
Okay,
he was in.
that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that just makes it even worse.
Crazy.
So, yeah. Needless to say, when you give this much money and this much attention, this much power to a 19-year-old kid playing in the NBA, you can't tell me that you're expecting great things to come from him. He's
been great on the court.
He's not bad on the court, man.
It's like top 3 rookies.
But I'll tell you what, it goes back to how you were raised. And if you're not raised right, you don't understand there's a certain way you are supposed to act in society, whether you're white or black or whatever. Don't throw the race card in here. Mm-hmm. You are supposed to act a certain way.
Right.
Respectful, humbling. I can't really think of any other words, but
those are the 2 big ones.
Acting with common sense.
Yeah.
Jahlil Okafor not doing that.
Yeah, it's turned out to be a punk.
Because I don't think we're at that level yet. Johnny Manziel's a punk.
Oh, there's a...
Johnny Manziel passed the punk stage.
Yeah, he's past the
year
punk
ago.
stage. I don't know what the past the punk stage is, but he's certainly there.
Yeah, there's words that we probably can't say.
Well, a punk can be changed. Jahlil
I don't think Jahlil Okafor is there yet.
He's acting like a punk.
No, I think he's just...
He may not be full on punk.
He's acting like...
But he's acting like one.
He hasn't been educated on, dude, there's right and wrong stuff. You're doing wrong stuff. What the heck are you doing? Stop doing it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily a punk. I think a punk
It's not punk status yet.
No, because a punk has a history. Jahlil Okafor doesn't have a history until now with this stuff.
Okay, fair enough.
So that's what I'm saying.
That's fair.
I'm not calling him a punk, but I am saying, Brent Bonfleur, at the end of the day, with all this stuff, you've got the money, Jahlil Okafor. You're the big shot for the Sixers. You're in the NBA now. It's your world.
And we're just living in it.
Exactly. Needless to say. Hope a couple veteran players decide to go to Philadelphia, change around that young, inexperienced team. That would certainly help them out. Oh wait, you gotta
shut up.
You gotta give a reason for Going to Philadelphia.
Hey, we'll see. We'll see.
What's interesting about playing with a bunch of young kids?
In 4 years, you're going to be buying me dinner from that because you're wrong and I'm right.
Did we make a bet on that? What did we make a bet on?
I can't remember. We made a bet on something.
I know we did.
I can't remember what it was. Yeah,
that's terrible. We're gonna have to figure that out. We'll settle that next weekend, I guess. Figure out what that bet was. I know it's Buffalo Wild Wings, actually.
Yeah, something.
It is.
Yeah.
All right.
Just can't remember what it was over.
I know. We'll figure it out and we'll let you know. Great show today. We are finished. Again, no predictions for the week. Brent Bonfleur's got a split, so just our regular podcast.
Got
today.
a really good. We're gonna fight over this one. Let me tell you. Topic for. Here's what's really going on next week.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
It has to do with what you and I talked about in private.
Really?
This weekend.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
So.
Hopefully a Husker football podcast coming your way pretty soon here as well, Devin Cleach. Hopefully
he's still alive. I saw him the other day.
Yeah,
he's alive.
We're all good.
So
hopefully we'll have that. So stay tuned. Facebook.com/TheRoute2 @the_Route2 on Twitter. TheRoute2.wordpress.com. We'll see you next week.